All right, so you've got this mountain of information, right? Articles, interviews, reports, all sorts of stuff, and you're trying to figure out what it all means. Like, what's the story here?
Exactly. You're looking for the signal in the noise.
That's exactly it, and that's what we do here on the deep dive, right?
Absolutely. We help you sift through it all.
Today we're diving into a really interesting topic, how we can make sense of qualitative data. So not just numbers and stats, but the kind of information that comes from people's experiences and
The
perspectives.
stuff that's harder to quantify.
Right. The messy but real stuff. And we're going to be looking at two really cool ways to do this.
Thematic analysis and discourse analysis.
Exactly. And these are powerful methods for finding patterns and digging into those deeper meanings hidden within qualitative data. And you, the listener, you sent us some fascinating sources to work with.
Yeah, we've got a great mix here. There's this research article about education in Bangladesh that actually uses both thematic and discourse analysis.
Oh, interesting. So we can see how they're applied in a real-world setting.
Yeah. And there's also this really practical guide to thematic analysis by Braun and Clark.
Oh, those names ring a bell. They're like the go-to people for thematic analysis, aren't they?
They really are. Their framework is widely used. We've also got some clear explanations from atlas.ti, which is a qualitative data analysis software.
Oh, so a tool that can help us actually do this kind of analysis. Cool.
Right. And we have some pieces from teachers' notes that show how thematic analysis is used across a bunch of different fields. Education is one of them, of course.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack these two approaches, thematic analysis and discourse analysis, in a way that makes sense. We want to get to the heart of what they are, break down the steps involved, and see how they relate to each other.
Basically, by the time we're done, you should feel like you can use these tools yourself.
Exactly. You'll be able to spot those key patterns in your own research, your own reading, just in your own understanding of the world. So let's start with thematic analysis. What's the big idea here? What is it all about?
At its core, thematic analysis is all about finding patterns in qualitative data.
Okay, patterns. Like what kind of patterns are we talking about?
Well, we call these patterns themes. And they can emerge from all sorts of data interview transcripts, focus group discussions, open-ended survey responses.
Basically, any time people are sharing their thoughts and experiences in their own words.
Right. And what's really cool is that thematic analysis is used across so many different fields.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, psychologists use it to understand human behavior and experiences. Marketers use it to figure out what consumers think and feel about products.
And in education, researchers use it to study things like teaching and learning.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. Sociology, healthcare, even business. It's a very versatile tool.
Now, one thing that struck me when I was looking through these sources is that thematic analysis seems really flexible. It's not like there's just one right way to do it.
You're absolutely right. That's one of its major strengths. Researchers can adapt it to fit their research questions and their data.
So could you give us an example of how that flexibility plays out in practice?
Sure. Let's say a researcher is going into a study with a completely open mind. They don't have any preconceived notions about what themes they might find.
So they're just letting the data guide them.
Exactly. That's called an inductive approach. The themes emerge organically from the data itself. It's like piecing together a puzzle.
Okay, I get that. But what if a researcher already has some ideas about what they might find?
Well, in that case, they might use a deductive approach. They start with specific questions or concepts in mind, and then look for those themes in the data.
So it's more targeted. They're using the data to confirm or refute their initial ideas.
Exactly. And there's also flexibility in terms of how deep you go with your analysis.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Well, you could focus on what's explicitly stated in the text.
So just sticking to the surface level.
Right. We call that a semantic level of analysis. But you could also dig deeper and try to understand the underlying assumptions and interpretations.
Like reading between the lines.
Exactly. That's called latent level analysis.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. Now, those sources you mentioned talked about a 6-step process for thematic analysis developed by Braun and Clark.
Right. It's a really clear and practical framework, and it seems to pop up everywhere.
So walk us through those steps. What's the first one?
The first step is all about getting to know your data, really immersing yourself in it.
So reading through everything carefully.
Multiple times, ideally, maybe even summarizing each piece of data. It's about developing a deep understanding of what you're working with.
Okay, immersion. Makes sense. What's next?
Step 2 is where you start breaking down the data into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay, so how do you do that?
It's called coding. You identify specific words, phrases, sentences, or even whole paragraphs that seem important or relevant to your research question.
And then you give them a label or a code.
Exactly. It's like tagging different parts of the data so you can easily find and group them later.
So it's like creating your own organizational system for the data.
That's a great way to put it. And the codes should be short, descriptive, and meaningful to you.
Got it. So we've got our data all coded up. What's step 3?
Step 3 is where things start to get really interesting. This is where you start grouping those codes together into broader themes.
So we're moving from the micro level of individual codes to a more macro level understanding.
Right. You're looking for connections and patterns across your codes. What ideas keep coming up? What are the overarching stories the data is telling you?
So the themes capture the essence of what the data is all about.
Exactly. And they should be more than just summaries. They should represent a deeper level of meaning and interpretation.
Okay, so we've got our initial themes. What's next?
Step 4 is all about reviewing those themes. Taking a step back and asking yourself, do these themes really reflect what's in the data?
So it's a chance to refine your thinking.
Exactly. You might realize that some themes overlap too much or that some aren't really capturing anything meaningful.
And then you might split some themes, merge others, or even discard some altogether.
Right. It's an iterative process. You're constantly refining and sharpening your analysis.
Okay, once you're happy with your themes, what happens then?
Step 5 is all about defining and naming those themes.
So making sure they're crystal clear.
Exactly. You need to be able to articulate what each theme is about and give it a name that accurately reflects its meaning.
And why is that so important?
Well, it's crucial for communicating your findings to others. If your themes are vague or poorly defined, no one will understand what you're talking about.
And probably not even you in a few months' time.
You got it. Clear definitions and names help ensure that everyone is on the same page.
And finally, we reach the last step, the write-up.
Yes. Step 6 is where you pull everything together. You present your themes, you provide evidence from the data to support them, and you discuss what it all means.
So you're telling the story that the data has revealed.
That's a great way to put it. And you're also connecting your findings to the existing research and discussing the implications of your work.
So that's the 6-step process. It's quite a journey. You start with this raw data, and you end up with these well-defined themes that tell a compelling story.
It's a process of discovery, really, and it's a very rewarding one.
Now, we've talked about the steps, but what are some of the benefits of using thematic analysis? Why would a researcher choose this approach?
Well, one of the biggest advantages is its flexibility, as we've discussed. You can adapt it to different research questions and data types.
And it's a relatively accessible method, right?
Okay.
You don't need years of specialized training to do it.
True. It's a great starting point for people who are new to qualitative research, but experienced researchers use it too.
Right. It's not just a beginner's tool.
Not at all. It can be used to address complex research questions, and importantly, it provides a really rich and in-depth understanding of the data.
You're not just skimming the surface, you're really getting into the nitty-gritty of what people are saying and why.
Exactly. And another plus is that it promotes transparency. You're very clear about how you arrived at your themes. You can show your work, so to speak.
So it's a rigorous but also accessible approach. Now, some of our sources specifically focus on how thematic analysis is used in education. So what are some examples of research questions in education that this approach can help answer?
Lots of really interesting ones. Researchers might use it to explore how students interact with each other in classrooms, or to investigate what challenges teachers are facing in their work.
Or to see how different teaching methods impact learning outcomes.
Right. Or to examine the diverse experiences of students from different backgrounds or with different learning styles.
Okay, so really getting into the heart of what's happening in educational settings. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about discourse analysis. It's another way to analyze qualitative data. So how does it relate to thematic analysis?
Well, both approaches are interested in understanding meaning, but they go about it in different ways.
So tell us more about discourse analysis. What's its focus?
Discourse analysis is all about language in use.
What does that mean, language in use?
It means looking at language not just as a set of words, but as a tool that people use to communicate, to build relationships, to influence others.
So it's about the social context of language.
Exactly. How language functions in real-world situations.
And it's not just spoken language either, right?
No, discourse analysis can be applied to any form of communication. Written texts, online discussions, even nonverbal cues, it's all fair game.
So give us some examples of what a discourse analyst might focus on.
Sure. They might look at things like how people use specific words or phrases to convey their ideas.
Or how they structure their sentences to create certain effects.
Right, or how they respond to each other in conversations, how they interrupt, how they agree or disagree, how they try to persuade each other.
So it's really getting into the nuances of communication, the subtle ways that meaning is created and negotiated.
Exactly. And discourse analysts are often interested in how language reflects power dynamics. Who gets to speak? Who gets listened to? How do people use language to assert authority or to resist it?
That's fascinating. So we can see how this approach can be really powerful for understanding things like social inequality or political rhetoric.
Absolutely. And it can also be used to study things like gender, race, and identity. How do these social categories get constructed and reinforced through language?
Okay, so discourse analysis is all about the how of communication, how language is used to achieve social goals. But how is that different from thematic analysis?
Well, thematic analysis is more focused on the what of communication.
Yeah.
What are the key themes or patterns that emerge from the data?
So it's about identifying the content, the main ideas.
Exactly. And those themes can be about anything: people's experiences, their beliefs, their values, their concerns.
Whereas discourse analysis is more interested in how those themes are expressed and negotiated through language.
That's a great way to put it.
So thematic analysis is about identifying the building blocks of meaning, and discourse analysis is about understanding how those building blocks are put together and used in social interactions.
Yes. And how they're influenced by the broader social context.
This has been a really helpful breakdown. I'm starting to see how these two approaches complement each other.
They really do. They offer different but valuable perspectives on qualitative data.
And you, the listener, how can you use this knowledge to make sense of the information you encounter in your own life?
Well, thematic analysis can help you identify those key takeaways from any set of data, whether it's research articles, news stories, or even just conversations with
So
friends.
it's about finding those recurring patterns and extracting the main ideas.
Exactly. And discourse analysis can help you become a more critical reader and listener.
How so?
Well, it encourages you to pay attention to the language people use and the context in which they use it.
So you're not just taking things at face value, you're thinking about the underlying messages and the potential biases.
Right. You're asking yourself, why are they saying it this way? Who are they trying to persuade? What are they leaving unsaid?
So it's about developing a deeper understanding of how language works in the world. This has been a really fascinating deep dive. Thank you for guiding us through these complex but important topics.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, I'd leave you with this thought. As you go back to the sources you shared with us, try looking at them through the lens of thematic analysis and discourse analysis. What new insights can you glean? What patterns emerge? How is language being used to shape meaning and understanding? The answers might surprise you. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.